It's one of the most well-known battles in history. But have you ever wondered what actually happened at the Battle of the Somme? Well, today we're going to find out exactly that. How did it start? The battle began on July 1st, 1916, when the British Expeditionary Force launched an offensive on both sides of the Somme River in France. On July, the British launched their attack, but within minutes it became clear that something was wrong. Over 57,000 British soldiers had been wounded or killed, making it the deadliest day in British military history, and this was just the beginning. There was heavy machine gun fire coming from the German trenches, indicating that they were fully aware of the British approach. But what happened for the rest of the war? Well, the heavy losses led to widespread grief and anger. With many people questioning the purpose of the war and the leadership of the British commanders, following the conclusion of the Battle of the Somme in November 1916, the Western Front settled back into a pattern of trench warfare that had characterized much of World War I up until that point. The fighting continued sporadically throughout 1917 and 1918, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The region around the Somme was left devastated by the fighting, with entire villages destroyed and countless graves dotting the landscape. The legacy of the Somme would continue to be felt for generations to come. Despite suffering heavy losses on the first day, the British were determined to succeed in their mission. Over the next 4 months, although the British ultimately emerged victorious, the heavy losses they suffered had a profound impact on the course of the war and the 20th century as a whole. If you like this type of content, please subscribe. So if you want to learn more about the Great War, check them out. Thanks for watching. As we remember the fallen soldiers of the Somme, let us also reflect on the importance of peace and the need to learn from the mistakes of the past. They launched a series of attacks. It was until the final year of the war in 1918 that the Allies finally achieved a breakthrough. In the aftermath of the battle, numerous monuments and memorials were erected to commemorate the fallen soldiers. One of the most famous is the Thiepval Memorial, which bears the names of over 72,000 British soldiers who died in the Somme, with their bodies never being recovered. In March of that year, the Germans launched their last major offensive, but this proved to be a costly mistake. Historians have examined new sources to provide fresh perspectives on the conflict, shedding more light on the experiences of the soldiers who fought there. Despite its tragic toll on human life, the battle has also been seen as a pivotal moment in the course of the war. It marked a turning point in the conflict, leading to the eventual collapse of the Central Powers and the redrawing of the map of Europe. The exhausted German forces were eventually pushed back, leading to the armistice that ended the war in November 1918, gradually advancing several miles beyond the Somme River. However, these gains came at a tremendous cost. The battles were characterized by brutal trench warfare, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. It turned out that a British soldier named Harry Frederick Gow had accidentally blown the whistle to start the attack 1 hour early, which took place from November to December 1916. The British were trying to capture the high ground near the village of Beaumont Hamel, but the Germans fiercely defended the position. After weeks of fighting, the British finally succeeded in capturing the heights, but not before suffering nearly 80,000 casualties. Another significant battle was the Battle of the Scarpe, which took place in May 1917. The British were trying to advance towards the city of Lens, but the Germans were prepared and launched a counterattack, forcing the British to retreat. Not only that, but he had done so while still inside the British trenches, alerting the Germans to their position. The British and German forces fought bitterly for every inch of ground. By the time the battle came to an end in November 1916, both sides had suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties, but neither had achieved their objectives. Overall, the Battle of the Somme was a costly and brutal affair, with both sides suffering tremendous losses. Despite the heavy casualties, the British were ultimately successful in achieving their main objective of breaking through the German lines. They also succeeded in relieving the pressure on the French at Verdun, allowing the French army to stabilize the situation there. To make matters worse, a thick fog had rolled in that morning, which prevented the British artillery from providing effective support. As a result, the British soldiers were forced to advance across no man's land in the open, making them easy targets for the German machine guns. Its main objective was to break through the German lines and advance towards the city of Perrin. This was part of a larger strategy known as the Battle of the Ancre, which aimed to force the Germans into retreating from the strategically important town of Verdun. Prior to the attack, the British had been engaged in trench warfare with the Germans for over 2 years. The Western Front had become a stalemate, with neither side able to make any significant gains. In order to break this deadlock, the British commander, General Douglas Haig, decided to launch a massive offensive. Along a 150-mile stretch of the Western Front, the plan called for the British and French forces to attack simultaneously, which would hopefully overwhelm the Germans and force them to retreat. However, due to miscommunication and a series of unfortunate events, the French attack was delayed by 2 days, leaving the British to carry out their attack alone. What happened next is now considered one of the biggest blunders in military history. Within an hour of the start of the battle, the British had suffered nearly 20,000 casualties. By the end of the first day, what happened during the war? So we know that the first day of fighting at the Somme was a disaster for the British. One of the most intense battles was the Battle of the Ancre Heights. Throughout the battle, however, the victory came at such a tremendous cost that it had a profound impact on the morale of the British public. What happened after? In fact, the following year, in 1917, the British would go on to suffer another major defeat at the Battle of Passchendaele, which resulted in over 300,000 casualties. And the war came to an end, the Allies began to withdraw from the Western Front, and the defeated Central Powers were occupied by the victorious Allies. The battle is remembered as one of the most brutal and costly in human history, serving as a reminder of the horrors of war and the importance of peace. In recent years, the battle has also been the subject of renewed scholarly interest. In conclusion, the Battle of the Somme was a defining moment in World War I. It's a brutal and costly affair that resulted in hundreds of thousands of casualties. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned for more content.